You give a lot of people hope, and a lot of people look up to you. Millions of people look up to you. If we think about young people in high school, maybe in college, what advice would you give to them about if they want to try to do something big in this world, they want to really have a big positive impact, what advice would you give them about their career, maybe about life in general?
Try to be useful. Do things that are useful to your fellow human beings, to the world. It's very hard to be useful. If you can live a useful life, that is a good life. A life worth having lived.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
모든 것은 나로부터 시작한다. 수동적인 태도로 무엇을 받으려 하지 말고 내가 먼저 유용한 존재가 되어 가족, 지인, 직장, 더 나아가 이 사회의 가치를 먼저 베푸는 사람이 되어라가 첫 번째 조언입니다.
But I encourage people to read a lot of books. Basically, try to ingest as much information as you can, and try to also just develop a good general knowledge. Encourage people to read broadly in many different subject areas, and then try to find something where there's an overlap of your talents and what you're interested in. So reading a broad range, just really read it. At one point when I was a kid, I read through the encyclopedia, so that was pretty helpful.
And I just read a lot. I probably took every book in the Omaha Public Library, and every book they had on investing or the stock market, basically. I was very interested in the New York Stock Exchange. I thought maybe I'd want to become a specialist when I grew up, and maybe I still will. And then finally I read Graham's book when I was at the University of Nebraska, The Intelligent Investor, when I was 19, and that just changed my whole framework. But the advice I would give is to read everything in sight.
I think the first is you need to work, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. Work hard, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And if you do simple math, you say okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. All a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people.
롤계의 절대 강자 T1이 페이커와 뱅기, 가장 위대한 농구팀 시카고 불스의 조던과 피펜, 문화를 선도하는 애플의 스티브 잡스와 팀 쿡, 단순한 운동이 아닌 삶의 열정을 전파하는 나이키의 필 라이트와 빌 바우어만 코치. 혼자 가면 빨리 가지만 함께 가면 멀리 갈 수 있습니다.
Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So, for any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts.
물론 최근에 테슬라가 광고를 시작했지만 경쟁사들이 수십억 달러를 광고비에 투자할 동안 테슬라는 상품 본연의 가치에 더 집중하며 광고비를 아끼고 수직 계열화를 통해 전기차 보급이 선두주자로 맹렬히 질주 중입니다.
The final thing is to sort of don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach, or first principles, which is rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is now is the time to take risk. As you get older, your obligations increase. And once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you.